Hey folks, welcome to the Power of Zero show. I am your host, Dave McKnight, best-selling author of The Power of Zero, Look Before You Lerp, The Volatility Shield, and Tax-Free Income for Life, all of which can be bought in bulk at davidmcknightbooks.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do so at McKnight & Co, at McKnight & Co. And if you are looking for someone to help you navigate all of the pitfalls that stand between you and the 0% tax bracket, you can head over to davidmcknight.com. And if you're an advisor who wants to level up your game and start to adopt the Power of Zero worldview, you can head over to powerofzero.com. This week, we are going to update you on all of the latest on Joe Biden's tax plans. Now that he's got the pandemic relief behind him, he can now focus on his tax plan, which he campaigned heavily on during his campaign for president, and the hallmark of which was that he was not going to tax anybody who made less than $400,000. So today we're going to talk about some of the things that are coming into sharper focus. And does he really mean anybody not making less than $400,000, or is there a little asterisk next to that? And then we'll review some of the other things that are likely to be included in the tax bill that's coming up. And we will also discuss some of the things that we had originally thought were going to be included that are not likely to be included. So that said, let's jump right in. Well, the first thing that we have to underscore is that Joe Biden is indeed committed to his pledge. These are everything I'm telling you is according to people that are familiar with the thinking of President Biden. He is still committed to his pledge that nobody making under $400,000 will face tax increases so long as you are married filing jointly. If you are an individual, if you're a single filer, then that number goes down to $200,000. So there was a lot of back and forth between the press and Jen Psaki, who is Joe Biden's press secretary, and it was finally conceded that that number, that $400,000 threshold, applied to families. So if you are an individual or you're married and you're filing individually, you have a $200,000 threshold, at which point you have to worry about whether your taxes are going to be going up. So I think that's an important consideration, because a lot of people that we talk to day in and day out are in fact single. And so that $200,000 threshold now comes into play. Joe Biden is still planning on taxing corporations at an increased rate. That rate will likely go up to 28% from 21%. Now, remember, when you tax corporations, how do corporations manage that tax? They tend to increase their prices. And so that tax gets, for all intents and purposes, gets passed along to the consumer. So that is a scenario in which if you make less than $400,000, you could likely see a stealth tax in the form of higher prices on the things that you consume. What else here? We know that if you make more than $400,000, he's still standing by his pledge to increase your tax rate from 37% to 39.6%. Now, that's not the only way that he's going to be raising taxes on you. He wants to cap itemized deductions at 28%. Let's also remember what he has promised to do for 401ks. Remember, if you he views 401k deductions as being sort of unfair for those who make who are in the lower tax brackets. Here's an example. If you contribute $10,000 to your 401k and you're in the 37% tax bracket, you get $3,700 of tax savings. If you're in the 10% tax bracket and contribute $10,000 to your 401k, you only get $1,000 worth of tax savings. He wants to levelize that. He wants to find a number that's the same for everybody. So if you're in the 10% tax bracket, you would be able to get a deduction of around 26%. If you're in the 37% tax bracket, you would get a deduction at 26%. Of course, that means for those of you who are in tax brackets above 26%, the 401k getting that contribution on the front end makes very, very little sense. You are much more you're more benefited by taking the Roth approach, by paying taxes on those dollars today, contributing them to your tax-free vehicles and letting them grow in a tax-free way, and then insulating yourself at the same time from the impact of higher taxes. Experts close to the president are saying that both of those things have a high likelihood of going through. So they have a high likelihood of being included in the tax bill when it comes out. By the way, when is the tax bill going to be coming out? Now that the pandemic legislation is behind us, Joe Biden had long said that that was his primary concern, is getting the stimulus approved and really focusing on distributing vaccines to everyone. And he has stated as much, that by the end of May, they should be available to all adult Americans. They're still testing vaccines on children, so they're not going to rule on that until those trials are carried out and they can study the results. Now, this is something that had actually scared me a bit, and it looks like Biden may not have the political capital to ram this through this year. He had discussed that to shore up Social Security, he had wanted to increase the Social Security payroll tax on dollars. Well, let's talk about how it works currently. You pay Social Security tax. If you're an employer, you pay 15.3%. That's the employer's half, 7.65, plus the employee's side is 7.65. So the employee pays the 7.65, but the employer is responsible for the other half. And if he's paying for his own, he pays the full 15.3 on himself. What he had proposed during his campaign was that anybody making between $142,800 and $400,000 would not pay any additional Social Security payroll tax. And that once you got above, so that's sort of what we call a donut hole. Once you got to 400,000 above, then you would have to continue to pay that Social Security payroll tax in perpetuity, ad infinitum. You make $1 billion, you would pay that either 7.65 or 15.3, depending on whether you're employee or employer, all the way up to whatever you made that year. Okay, and he feels like that would eventually shore up the Social Security shortfall, right? Because we know that because of the pandemic, Social Security was previously going to become insolvent in 2034, now 2031, Medicare 2026, now 2023, or 2022, according to some experts. In order to make that change, experts are saying they would have to have a much broader discussion between the House and Senate on Social Security, okay? Much more intense discussion on how to shore up the Social Security program for the long haul. And experts don't believe that Joe Biden has that type of political capital. You remember, most of what you're trying to accomplish, you want to accomplish it during your first term. You're perceived sort of as this lame duck during the second term. And during the first term, it's the first 100 days that you have the chance to sort of solidify whatever your legislative initiatives are going to be. So Joe Biden has got, and the reason that is because most of these things ruffle so many feathers that you end up losing either the House or the Senate or both at midterm. So presidents know that they've got to push this stuff through. And that's why we're seeing such a big emphasis on tax reform so early in Joe Biden's administration. When are we going to see this happen? Probably close to October, going into force starting January 1st, 2022. So anything we discussed today as being likely to take place will take place most likely, given that Democrats hold the Senate and the House, and they can get this through budget reconciliation. All they need is just a simple majority to push this through. We are likely going to see this year through budget reconciliation being put into force in January of 2022. All right, what else is he looking at? Like we said, a top tax rate of 39.6 for those making more than 400,000, but more importantly, he wants for those who make more than $1 million per year, he wants their capital gains to be taxed at ordinary income with a top rate of 39.6. So consider going from 20% all the way up to 39.6. Incidentally, he's also talking about raising the estate tax rate from 40% to 45%. Now, that doesn't seem like a very big deal. What would be a big deal is if that estate tax exemption were decreased from the sum $23 million it is for a married couple today down to maybe a $5 or $6 million. That would be an effective tax increase for people looking to pass their businesses and their wealth on to the next generation. Joe Biden has also, there has been some discussion as to whether he would limit or eliminate the SALT deductions. Remember, state and local taxes, those have been capped at $10,000 per year. There's been some discussion as to whether he would eliminate that. However, if he did do so, if he restored the full SALT deduction, that would be seen as a tax break for the wealthy. And Joe Biden is trying to avoid anything that has the semblance of being a tax break for the wealthy. There is a workaround. He could add tax credits that would benefit lower income taxpayers and couple those with additional taxes for high income earners. That's a possibility according to the experts. All right, a lot of these changes, we know that one of Joe Biden's big initiatives is that he wants to push through a $2 to $3 trillion infrastructure package. These would go to repair the highways and the bridges all across America. And one of the thoughts was that he would couple his tax legislation with that infrastructure bill and sort of tout it as a way to pay for the infrastructure that he is proposing, the increased construction for infrastructure. So what that tells me is that any tax increases that Joe Biden is contemplating do not get earmarked to pay down debt or to shore up the things that are driving the debt moving forward. Okay, so there's no discussion of how to pay for Medicare, which is probably in the most dire of straits. Of anything we've talked about, it's the most financially weak of the entitlement program. So there's no discussion on how to shore that up. There is some discussion, like I said, of shoring up Social Security, but most experts don't believe he has the political capital to be able to do that. So really, the tax increases that are being proposed would be earmarked for the infrastructure package. So they wouldn't do anything to shore up Medicare. They wouldn't really do anything to shore up Social Security, and they wouldn't do anything to pay down the national debt, which is growing to precariously high levels. One thing that is being discussed, and this is something that I've long talked about, I've talked about it in several different podcasts, is that Joe Biden is contemplating extending the tax cuts put into place by Trump with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2018. Remember, those expire in 2026. So January 1st, 2026, we revert back to what tax rates were in 2017. Joe Biden is contemplating extending those tax cuts. And generally, whenever you extend those through budget reconciliation, you can extend those for 8 years. So what that would do is if it started in 2022, that would extend it through 2029, and we would revert back to 2017 levels in 2030. Now, if you've listened to my podcast long enough, you know that I believe that there's something really bad coming down the pike in 2030. And this is based on a lot that I've read in a very good book called Prosperity in the Age of Decline, where the author of that book, who has made postulations on the economy for basically the last 4 decades and been right about 95% of the time, he says that with the perfect storm confluence of demographics and the underfunding of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and the growth of the national debt, that 2030 will be a day of reckoning for our country. So I can't imagine these low tax cuts will, for a broad swath of Americans, will extend beyond 2030. I just think that we'll be in such dire straits by 2030 that they will have to raise revenue across the board on every tax-paying American. Now, I will discuss that I had Ed Schlott on my program a couple weeks ago, and I asked Ed Slott when he thought the tax rates were going up on middle America. And he said that he thought it was going to be next year. Now, Ed and I agree on just about everything. We do not agree on this particular point. He believes that the math will force the federal government to raise taxes on every American starting next year. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that the federal government believes that they can continue to kick the can down the road. It's very, very dangerous to raise taxes if you want to keep your job politically until you're absolutely required to do so. It's very dangerous to raise taxes on a broad swath of Americans. Those are the types of people that get you reelected. If you raise taxes on Main Street America before you absolutely have to, then you will likely get voted out of office. So they're pushing this off as long as they possibly can. However, there comes a point in time beyond which you can no longer procrastinate raising taxes. I think 2030 is that time. And I think that it will happen during a perfect storm of other events that could drive us into a deep recession, if not a depression. I don't want to wax apocalyptic. This is just how I see it. And I see that if these tax cuts extend through 2029, the federal government will be even more dire straits by the time we hit 2030. One of the experts says if there is a negotiation, it might leave some additional room for taxes that go up on perhaps a slightly broader portion of the population than just either corporations or the top 2%. So in other words, I think that there is a small possibility that we could see higher taxes on people making less than $400,000, married filing jointly making less than $400,000. It's a slim possibility, but it is a possibility because people recognize that there's just not enough revenue to be able to pay for all of these different programs. So in summary, we will see a Biden tax reform bill coming probably in the next month or so, pushed through with budget reconciliation to be implemented on January 1st of 2022. I think there's some good news in there for people that make more than $400,000. You will not likely see that Social Security tax on your income made above and beyond $400,000 in perpetuity. I think that will likely be pushed off. And if it's pushed off, Joe Biden may not have enough political capital to readdress it in his second year in office. And as a confirmation of what I had said in my earlier podcast, I believe that they will extend the tax cuts on the middle class, and that will be an 8-year tax extension. It will go through 2029. What does that mean for all of you? That means that if you make less than $400,000 and you believe that tax rates down the road are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today, that you now have a 9-year period of time, assuming that what I say comes true and what these experts say comes true, a 9-year period of time within which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. This is huge, people. This is absolutely huge. Instead of having 5 years to get all the heavy lifting done, and I've talked about some of the math here about how, say you got $1 million IRA, you want to get all the heavy lifting done in 5 years, that's going to force you into a much higher tax bracket, where if you stretch that $1 million shift over 9 years, you don't have to shift as much to get the heavy lifting done by 2030. And that keeps you in a much lower tax bracket. That means that the concepts that we're talking about that will assist you in getting to the 0% tax bracket are even more feasible. They're even more mathematically beneficial to you in terms of being able to keep. Remember, the lower the tax bracket you're in as you shift this money, the more money stays in your pocket, the longer your retirement savings last. So this could be a great deal of good news for those of you who are looking to get to the 0% tax bracket and looking to do an asset shift. It's not great news for our country, because I think that once again, 2030 will be a year of reckoning for our country. All right, that's the show for today. Again, if you are looking for someone to help you navigate all of these principles and implement them in your retirement plan, insulate you from tax rate risk and longevity risk, all within the very same financial plan, head on over to davidmcknight.com. We will hook you up with one of our elite Power of Zero advisors, trained, vetted, qualified personally by me. If you're an advisor who wants to level up your game and adopt the Power of Zero worldview and become the tax-free planning expert in your community, you can head over to powerofzero.com. Again, would love a follow on Twitter at McKnight & Co. Also on Instagram, David C. McKnight, David C. McKnight. And would also love any reviews for our books or our documentary, The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming. Thank you for being with us. We will look forward to chatting with you. Same time,
next week.